Happy New Year and welcome to the Inside the FLX podcast. I'm Josh Durso, and as always, we are coming to you from the FingerLakes1.com studio in downtown Seneca Falls. It's a new year, and I'd like to thank everyone who has followed this podcast over the last 15 months. We start 2017 with over 40 interviews in the books, and this month we'll bring 4 more. They all start today, though, with Jackie Augustine, former Geneva City Councilor and soon-to-be co-host of an exciting new podcast here on this network. Jackie, thanks a lot for coming in.
Hi, Josh. Happy New Year.
Yes, Happy New Year to you, too. So, 2016's over.
Yes.
What are your gut reaction? 2016 is in the books. Successful, unsuccessful, terrible, awful, wonderful, some combination of all of the above?
Well, I mean, it's hard to overlook all the, incredibly sad events of 2016. So I think with all the year-end wrap-up stuff, I guess I'm still kind of stuck on that. But that said, I feel like 2017 gives us a lot of opportunities. So I'm looking forward to that. I feel like got to stay positive, look ahead. So, yeah.
Okay, so probably the biggest Geneva native, longtime counselor. The biggest story in Geneva right now is the former Geneva foundry. Today there was a pretty big story in the Finger Lakes Times. Mm-hmm. Talk to us a little bit about where you feel that stands right now. Some lawsuits appear to be coming down the pipe.
Right.
Where does it stand? Where do you think it needs to go? Look good, bad?
Well, I mean, I think it's sad all around because really, I mean, I grew up on the corner of State and Clinton Street, which is like right across from the foundry, and so, I mean, like you feel for the residents in the position they're in right now, but you can't help but look at it from the standpoint that, certainly there's blame to go around. There were missteps all around, but it's like there are these lawsuits against the state, the county, the city, who really are the residents, right? So it's like the residents inadvertently kind of suing themselves when you think about it, and so everybody's kind of left holding the bag while the company that caused the contamination is nowhere in the picture. Yep. So, that's going to play itself out, and I don't know how it's going to go. But I feel like the lesson in it is I don't want to, in 10 years or 20 years, see another lawsuit for any of the other projects in the community right now. So, you think about the landfills, you think about Crestwood, and there's always this tension between what do these businesses or companies owe to the community for doing something that's environmentally risky, that could potentially have long-term effects, and how do you actually make sure, A, that they're complying while they're in operation, but that, B, there is some recourse once they go out of business or leave the area or, reorganize in some way, and then the legal entity that was operating that is no longer a legal entity that you can go after. So I guess I'm not in the foundry situation enough to know how that's going to go, how that's going to play out, but I do see that there are some pretty significant lessons for what kind of oversight we have, not just at the local level, because I think we could talk a lot about, what is the role of city council in making sure they have information, in getting that to residents, in making sure things are done in response to information that's coming into staff. But also kind of on a regional level, like what are we actually expecting from these state agencies that are supposed to be monitoring and administering these rules and regulations? Mm-hmm. And do they have any contingency plan for when things go wrong?
Well, part of the process seemed to be that the technology changed, the technology got better, and they were able to see something that they previously weren't able to see. You bring up an interesting point, though, with the what entity are you going to go after 20 years after the company no longer exists? How, sort of philosophically speaking, how could, you would like to think that there could be a portion of the entity that remains no matter what, so that there is a fallback option. Do you think that that's something that, obviously that can't happen at the local level, but it would have to happen at the state level minimally, think it's something that could happen in theory?
Well, the city of Geneva joined with a bunch of other municipalities in participating in the hearing regarding the Crestwood project. Mm-hmm. And so we all have standing as this municipal coalition. And one of the requests that was made at that administrative hearing was that if a permit is issued, I mean, obviously the position was the permit should not be issued, but in addition to that, if a permit were to be issued, shouldn't the state require an independent assessment of risk, of environmental disaster contingencies, and establish a fund and make Crestwood either have some kind of insurance or other durable, sustainable plan for reimbursing and taking care of any damage? Because you think about it, all right, they start storing stuff there. 10 years down the road, let's say they've sold it to somebody else, which they've already now done in the interim anyway. So let's say that happens again, and it starts leaking. Mm-hmm. Well, what is the actual cost of providing drinking water to, hundreds of thousands of people? I mean, we're seeing in Flint, Michigan, it's not something individual municipalities can handle. So you really do need that state intervention. But the argument from a lot of legislators who fund and oversee the state agencies is, well, that makes the cost of doing business in New York State so much higher, and we can't have that. So in the name of job creation, we can't really ask them to set aside that kind of money. So there's got to be a balance there. I get concerned because I think too often it's tipped in favor of what I would call, the externalized costs, the idea that, well, we'll just push that off. We'll think about that later. At some point when something happens we didn't anticipate, then we'll figure out what to do. And then we'll all share the cost. When really, I don't know, I'm a fan of accountability. I'm a fan of trying to figure out, all right, if this is your business model and this is what you want to do, part of your business model has to be understanding you're responsible for cleaning up your messes should a mess occur. Mm-hmm. And that I still don't think we have enough teeth for. So, I mean, that is something that's going to have to happen at the state level, I think. Mm-hmm. Just because I don't think individual municipalities can necessarily have the power or enough scope, right? Like you think about like the landfills, like Seneca Falls has some control in theory over the operations of the landfill, but the impact of the landfill is far more than just Seneca Falls. So you really want some entity that can regionally or statewide, capture that kind of risk and understand what would need to be done. So another part, you mentioned Seneca Lake. Obviously, you've done a lot of writing in your column over the last 6 months or so about the $10 million bonus Geneva's getting for the lakefront connectivity and all that good stuff. What have you seen? What have you liked that you've seen, or what opportunities do you think are out there with that as a whole? Well, I went to the public meetings and looked at the proposals, and then afterwards asked the consultants if they had read my articles, and then forwarded them along to them because I have my kind of shopping list. If you had given me the $10 million directly, here's what I would have done with it. And I was actually pleasantly surprised by some aspects and concerned about others. So I really do believe that the 5 and 20 situation has to be corrected, and this is the time to do it. I was happy to see that the consultants seem to think that the lanes are going to be narrowed no matter what. Every proposal, the state has already said that that's what they're planning somewhere down the line when they redo the road. So the ability here to do that, I mean, that's going to happen. So the question is, do you do it and reserve enough money to also do other exciting things, or do you do this like deluxe model program? So So they had a $1 million, a $2 million, and a $3 million iteration. I think the $1 million iteration gets it done. That's enough. The $3 million includes like 2 roundabouts, and I'm not a fan of roundabouts, especially not near railroad tracks, because I just don't think, I mean, someone's got to do some traffic modeling and figure out at Lake Street, if you've got a train coming through and trash trucks and a roundabout. To me, that sounds terrible. It sounds like people would have a really bad visitor experience if they happened to be driving through when that happened. But I'm not an expert, so I will defer to people who can do that kind of modeling. But I think that's an exciting project, roundabouts aside, actually making 5 and 20 pedestrian friendly and easy access to the lakefront and downtown. Is a good thing.
Hasn't slowing down traffic been kind of like a bucket list item for that portion of 5 and 20 for a long time?
Yeah, I think not just slowing traffic down, but like reducing the amount of, the length of space that people have to dart across the road to get from one side to the other.
Yeah.
So anything that helps with that, I think, is going to make everybody's experience, whether they're a resident or a tourist or business owner, better.
On the very personal note, every time I drive through there, I realize how awful that road has become, and just in terms of condition, it is in really bad shape now.
Yeah.
For that being a hallmark of Geneva, it's not really a hallmark at all.
No.
Outside of that project, outside of the lakefront portion, the city itself, how do you feel things are going in Geneva?
Well, I think things are going well in Geneva, and I think the fact that the state awarded this $10 million is really a recognition that the city has been willing to think outside the box on a lot of things. And when I say that, I guess I should parse that out a little bit. Really, a lot of what's going on that's great in Geneva has been the city being able to get out of the way. So there have been new ideas and entrepreneurs and a lot of really exciting concepts. And the city has been able, I think, with city manager Matt Horn, driving the ship there, which, I mean, we can talk about that. Really, city council should be driving the ship, but that's a different conversation. But, with Matt at the helm, I think that he's been able to figure out these are ways the city can help. Here are ways that the city bureaucracy has kind of hindered things. And I think he's been able to strike a pretty good balance in saying, this is what we need to do to make sure everything's okay. And here's where some of the stuff we were doing was overkill. And then here's some new stuff that we should be trying and being willing to take a chance on. So I feel really optimistic that that seems to be working. And I hope that will continue into 2017.
What's the answer to that? Because you are not the first person, you are not the last person, and we cover a lot of meetings. We're in Wayne County, we're in Ontario County, Seneca County, and oftentimes you hear people, constituents, even members of various boards, complain that managers, administrators have too much control, or they take too much control and they overstep. But you just talked about a balance. You said yourself that really city council should be leading the charge.
Right.
What's the issue with that? Why is it happening? But how does it get corrected? Because I look at it and I think to myself, the only way that's going to be fixed is if city council or whatever the governing body is, the elected officials, step up and start doing it.
Right.
And if they don't, that person who is left managing that municipality the rest of the month has to, or else they're going to look like they aren't doing anything.
Yep. Oh, I totally agree. And, okay, so interesting. I just did this myself a second ago. When I was talking about the roundabouts, I said, well, I'm not an expert in traffic management, so I'll leave that to them. Now, here's why that statement alone could be problematic. Oftentimes on city council, I would hear people say, well, I'm not an expert. I'll leave that to the experts. That's true, right? Like you don't micromanage, don't try to do someone's job. You're not the public works director. You're not going to tell them how to pave the road. I get that. However, to go back to what I was saying, I wasn't saying I have no opinion about how the road should be redone, and I'm going to turn that over to the traffic experts. What I was saying, and what I wish more governing bodies would step up and say, is I do have an opinion, I do have a point of view, I do want to set a policy, but I want it to be based on facts that aren't just my opinion, right? So I want to take the facts from the people who actually have the ability to generate them, and then I want to put that back into the purview of discussion and policy and debate. So it's informed by that. So when you look at like a city council like Geneva, where you have a city manager form of government, city council is supposed to be, it's a two-way street. They say to Matt or any city manager, here are the things we'd like to do. Tell us how we do it, what's possible. And he's always, he can throw in his own ideas, he can bring staff ideas forward. But ultimately, city council has to say yes to this and no to that. And unfortunately, that requires time, interest, willingness to engage deeper than just once a month, right? Like you have to actually get to know the stuff. And that's why I think any governing body should have committees. Not so that the work is done in the committee and rubber stamped, but so that you actually have people who develop some expertise in some of these issues, who then, when the entire body is meeting, can say, I can back staff up when they say this because I understand it. Let me try explaining it to you with my policy hat on. And that seems to be what's missing, right? So you have this, you end up with what I would say are insecure or unsteady policymakers who say, I'm not an expert, but then aren't interested in developing any expertise, and then saying, hey, I actually want to know about this, and then I'm going to make an informed decision. Instead, they kind of substitute somebody else's judgment for their own, in which case I say, then just elect the staff people, right? Like, then what are they doing? So that, but it's a sticky situation, because once you start taking positions, once you start having a point of view, then you're subject to criticism. But if you didn't want to be criticized, then you shouldn't be in the public eye anyway.
Now, one of the more recent headlines in the last few days is the SUNY tuition proposal from Governor Cuomo, free for those making less than $125,000 effective 2019-ish, if adopted as is. You are an adjunct at SUNY CUKE, right? So what is your perspective on that as someone who has a little bit of skin in the game, as someone who sees students in general on a regular basis? What is your sort of take or perspective on it?
Well, CUKE is not a SUNY school.
It is not.
No, it is a private college. But I do, I feel like anyone in higher education probably has an opinion about this. And I have to admit that I have not looked at the specifics of it enough to know if this is general, like any public school for any degree, or if it is going to be specialized to certain fields. So I would love everybody to have access to all the educational opportunities that they can make good use of. But I guess that's where the question comes in. How, if we're paying for this, for making this investment, how much oversight do we have in the return on that investment? So first and foremost, like just my gut reaction, I think it's a great idea. I do think it's going to encounter some pushback, and I think that there has to be a readiness to discuss, how this money is being used. Is there more incentive for students to use community colleges and to get into specialized training programs? Like FLCC provides a lot of specialized programs that are a real help to our regional industries. So I can see a benefit there if there's some career counseling going into it to help students make those choices. But yeah, I'm a fan of the proposal in general. How could I not be? I think higher education's a good thing, just full stop. But
now, as a matter of one of the many things that state legislators are going to be looking at this year. What is your sort of, it's January, session's beginning,
right?
New elected officials, the whole 9 yards, new representative here in the 54th. What's your sort of expectation, not just here in the 54th, but across the board in general?
Well, you know, I just was reading the paper about the first action, yeah, and because you always think, wow, if you get elected to something, what's the first thing you're going to do? Mm-hmm. So of course, you see at the federal level, first thing they wanted to do was not any of the things everybody was talking about, but was like the ethics thing, which as an ethics professor, just you just like that's like fingernails on the chalkboard that they would go after that first. But for the state, did you see that the first thing that they did was outlaw the use of cell phone video cameras in the chambers under the idea that this is necessary for decorum? Yeah. And I thought, is that the most pressing issue facing the state right now, is a lack of decorum with people taking cell phone video? I mean, how about don't use your cell phone because you're clearly texting when other legislators are talking and that's really rude, or, like pay attention or something. But yeah, I thought that was very strange. And some of the quotes, like, DeFrancisco said, well, we did this because we couldn't possibly be more transparent. We're already on video. And I thought, well, I guess cell phone video would be even more transparent, right? Or at least as transparent. So I don't see how that's an argument for restricting it. And not that I'm saying that it makes sense for people to walk around videotaping stuff, but I don't know. Sometimes it just puzzles me. Like, if people should put energy into the things that matter most to them. That's my general philosophy. And the idea that they would put their energy into that first seems like, I mean, I don't want to be cynical, but I'm not sure that bodes well for everything else that's going to happen. So what do I wish they would do? Well, that wouldn't have been on the list, that's for sure.
There a I was going to say, is there sort of like a hierarchy of like a couple, 2-3 things that you would really like to see, even if they are just things that would impact here in the 54th?
Yeah.
Are there a couple, 2-3 things that you would like to see happen?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I would like to see some work on ending these unfunded mandates locally, because if people don't understand the way in which the tax structure affects economic development at the local level, they're really missing the boat. And I don't mean that to be some weird Republican talking point. I really believe that is true. So I think that is an issue that they haven't gotten right yet. I mean, you look at school funding, everything is skewed toward wealthier suburban communities. That is really who's benefiting from the current structures that we have. And rural areas and smaller urban areas, so basically all of Ontario County, with the exception of Victor, is really suffering from the kind of tax policies that we have right now, both on the school and the real property assessment, property tax side. So that's an issue. Ethics reform is certainly an issue, which I'm sure nobody wants to talk about, especially if the first thing was this video camera thing, because the amount of outside income that legislators are allowed to take is a problem. And this LLC loophole continues to be an issue that I understand is a little more technical, so maybe it doesn't get as much play for legislators who are looking for limited access to the media. They want a soundbite, they want an issue people can really latch onto. But that is really corrupting state government. And if all these indictments aren't enough to prove that to people, that something needs to change structurally, I don't know what else is going to do it. So that's another issue. And then environmental stuff. The DEC is supposed to revise all of their solid waste management policies this year. That's hugely important to us, but it should be important and concerning to everybody across the state, because if New York State is in the garbage business, we need to understand what that means long term. We need to have a long view with what that means for transportation corridors, what that means for the possibility of reviving incineration proposals. We need to look to what other states have done and where we might be headed and make sure we're out in front of doing things properly. And again, I mean, the foundry thing that you led with, we don't want to be in the position of 20 years from now dealing with an environmental disaster that we could have, with a little bit of foresight, taken care of before it happened. So those, just off the top of my head, those are my issues.
I mean, you speak to the environmental side, and I don't think there is a bigger, just coming out of 2016, with all of the focus here in Seneca County and in Ontario County on the landfilling issue specifically, and then also the looming Crestwood umbrella also. I don't think there is an issue or batch of issues that are more pressing this coming year. Specifically, Pam Helming, Senator Pam Helming, no longer Senator-elect Pam Helming. Right. What are your expectations into the first 6 months and beyond of her first term?
Well, I don't know. I don't know her well. I obviously was in the minority. I was not a supporter of her campaign. I still remain a little skeptical. I was not impressed with the fact that she was not transparent about her connection with Casella. And I really feel like for representing a district where the trash industry is really so critical, getting that out there, making that clear, and speaking to dispel any concerns should have been, the responsibility of someone who just from out of the gate wanted on the up and up to be out there and not have any concerns. So that doesn't quite sit well with me. But I'm hopeful that now that she's in the role she finds herself in, that she'll take seriously the representation of everybody, regardless of what side of the aisle they're on, and understand the critical threats that face the region as a result of the trash industry, and can balance those with the opportunities that are discussed around trash. You don't have to want every landfill shut down to still be a proponent of sensible regulations and good host agreements that contain a full variety of protections and are responsive to community needs. So it doesn't have to be this either or, but I'm hoping that in this role, she'll represent the larger community interest that will exist long beyond any operation of any particular landfill.
Now, as we get close here to the end of the show, we are excited, as in you and I.
That's right.
Excited about a new podcast that we're going to be doing here in the FingerLakes1.com studio. Starting, it looks like, the 4th week of this month. We don't have a name yet. No. But we will be. How excited are you about this? Just as a quick little heads up to everybody, it's going to be an issues-focused show. So we're going to be bringing you not the players necessarily. We will be talking about the players, but we will be bringing the issues themselves to those who follow and watch the podcast and listen to the podcast. How pumped are you to get going on something like this?
Well, I'm super excited. I feel like any time you have the opportunity to dive into stuff, count me in. That is what I love doing. And so I think our ability to talk about a couple of issues in depth, like, I just said LLC loophole is important to me. I don't feel like people know enough about it. I'm prepared to make that exciting for people to say, yeah, I want something done with the LLC loophole. Like, now it makes total sense. We need to be doing that. So that's what I'm hoping.
All right. Well, we will be, obviously, FingerLakes1.com. We'll have everything on that. We'll give everyone a big heads up as to when it's actually going to launch. Name still to be decided.
Yeah.
But we appreciate you coming on Inside the FLX today, Jackie.
Thanks for having me.
We'll have you back again, I'm sure.
All right.
As a programming note to our listeners, we'll be back next week with Joelle Murney-Karsten of the Seneca Falls Development Corporation. The following week, we'll have former Auburn Mayor Melanie Carnicelli on the podcast, and we'll also be bringing you a conversation with newly elected chairman of the Seneca County Board of Supervisors, Bob Shipley. Reminder, Inside the FLX airs Sundays at 7 p.m. on Time Warner Cable Channel 12. And, of course, the podcast is always available on iTunes, Stitcher, and the FingerLakes1.com app. For Jackie Augustine, I'm Josh Durso, wishing you all the best. Good night.